So good afternoon. I'm glad everybody made the half an hour time change here. So my name is Maxine Montello. I am the director of the New York Marine Rescue Center. We're located in Riverhead, New York, and going to talk about our project that we've been doing for the last 5 years involving some of our rehabilitated sea turtles. So if you're not familiar with our organization, we were formerly the Riverhead Foundation for Marine Research and Preservation. We changed our name in 2019 to the New York Marine Rescue Center. And so our mission is about marine mammals and sea turtles for the entire state of New York. We provide both in-field and rehab care for pinnipeds and sea turtles, and only provide just in-field care for small cetaceans. We used to rehab cetaceans a long time ago, but due to a lot of viruses that they tend to have, we no longer rehabilitate them. So we do still provide that in-field care for them. I want to do a plug for my team. So there's only 5 of us that are dedicated to the animal care. We run a 24-hour hotline that people can call and report these animals throughout the state of New York, where we'll go out and provide an in-field assessment. So we actually depend on the public to call us to get these reports of these stranding. So a lot of our data is obtained from just patrons making those calls. Right now our team is struggling through a little bit of a pinniped stranding season where we have seal pups and yearlings covering the island. So if you go to any of the South Shore beaches, we're getting calls of Fire Island, Montauk, Staten Island. And this will be going on until at least May at this point. So our organization is located in Riverhead, New York, right behind the Long Island Aquarium. Though the Long Island Aquarium is a for-profit, we are a little not-for-profit behind the scenes. And a little history there is that we actually were there first. And then part of the contract of the man that owned the land around us was to actually take care of us. And so the highest bidder had to showcase in their contract that they would support this organization because he saw how important this stranding network is to the state of New York. And so we're able to be in the shadows in the back. So if you ever go to the aquarium, you can request a tour to come behind the scenes. We look a lot different than the Long Island Aquarium. We're more of like a big old warehouse. But we are there doing really important work. And we're thankful for our spot because we do get to capture the audience and the people that go to the aquarium to learn about what we do there. So as you can see, we are in Riverhead, New York, but our response area is the entire state of New York, really focusing on the Long Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean exposure. We do have some duds that go up the Hudson River sometimes. So our response time can be anywhere between 30 minutes to 4 hours. We love a Friday night Staten Island call, a Montauk, whatever can happen. But the reality is we don't have Friday nights, right? We're on call 24 hours, and our season is really dependent on when the animals are stranding. And so we tend to see sea turtles in the winter and summer months for strandings. Our seal season, as I mentioned, started in January and will go till May. Cetaceans strand whenever they feel like it, and there's really no trend for those guys. So our team does work pretty around the clock responding to these animals. But I'm here to talk to you about sea turtles. So we can do a little quiz, a little post-lunch quiz here. If I can find this pointer, maybe? Yes. Okay, does anybody know who this is? Not a loggerhead. If you just name all 4, we could get there. This is your Atlantic green sea turtle. How about this guy? Easy peasy, right? This guy, loggerhead. I didn't trick you with 2 loggerheads here. Kemp's ridley, yes. So we know in New York we have 4 species that utilize our waters. That include the Atlantic green, the leatherback, the critically endangered Kemp's ridley sea turtle, as well as loggerheads. We mostly see juveniles, so these dinner plate sized turtles of green sea turtles and Kemp's ridleys. We don't really see many adults of that, though I did see a handout about our 2018 nesting Kemp's ridley that we had at Breezy Point. But that's really our only reference of an adult female in the area. For leatherbacks and loggerheads, we do see subadults, which are kind of our teenage turtles, and then we do see adult turtles as well that do come into our water sources. We know that these turtles inhabit our waters all summer long, but that's kind of where we end our knowledge of what they're doing here throughout New York. And so information that we have about sea turtles is really just from stranding data. And I'm here to show you that stranding data is super important for these species because we're able to know, gather insight on their age class, size composition, what they're eating, their reproductive status, health and population trends, and of course mortality rates and why these animals are dying in local waters. So stranding data is really what we have for these sea turtles currently. But clearly there's more information that we need to know about sea turtles, specifically about their utilization and that kind of wild movement that they have here in local waters. So historically, we've been collecting data since 1980, not me, clearly, but there was somebody there. And so to date, we've responded to over 2,000 sea turtles. So if you look at this great chart here, you have red is your loggerheads, green is your greens, Kemp's ridleys are in blue, and leatherbacks are in purple. And what you can see is that clearly loggerheads have been steady every single year that we're seeing these animals strand throughout New York, followed by Kemp's ridleys, and I keep on saying that they're the most critically endangered, but we have a lot of Kemp's ridleys here in New York, and so it may be a very important habitat here locally for those species. So Kemp's ridleys are secondary, and then greens, we started to see an increase of these guys, which could be resource-based of why they're coming here. And leatherbacks, unfortunately, we mostly see deceased leatherbacks. We don't get a lot of live strandings. The last live leatherback that we saw was in 2016. But mostly we see those three hard shell sea turtles, those Kemp's, greens, and loggerheads. I do want to point out that we've had hybrids here, mostly of loggerhead greens and loggerhead Kemp's. And this could be due to the uneven sex ratio that we're seeing out in our waters due to climate change. We know that the gender of sea turtles is based on the temperature of the sand. So the warmer the sand is, the more females that we're going to have. And having that unequal sex ratio is going to cause that imbalance in the wild and harder for these animals to find a mate. And so it may be a response that they are kind of finding other species to mate with, and that's why we're seeing hybrids. And we've confirmed these hybrids with tissue samples. And they're pretty evident that they are a kind of mix of a few species. And I have a photo later to show you. So why are these guys stranding? There's several reasons why we see sea turtles strand in New York, which include vessel interactions. So these animals are getting sharp force and blunt force trauma from recreational and commercial vessels. We have entanglements in mostly fisheries. You can see this leatherback that's entangled in some vertical lines, but also marine debris. We see animals entangled in balloon strings and other plastic bags. There's this term called debilitated sea turtle syndrome, which is just a general term that we see in older sea turtles that are malnourished. They have buoyancy issues. They usually have a heavy epibiotal load, which shows that they've been sessile for a very long time. Ingestion of marine debris, of course, is only going to be evident in those that pass in-house. And then cold stunning. So if you're not familiar with cold stunning, it's a phenomenon similar to hypothermia, where these animals are exposed to cold snaps in the temperature. So as our summer really fades into winter and we're lacking that fall kind of cue, these animals are not migrating out fast enough, and so they're being exposed to these quick drops in temperature. And because they're cold-blooded, they can't regulate their internal temperature, and so whatever the water temp is going to be what their internal temp is, and they become completely debilitated and float to the surface. And cold stunning is actually the leading cause of strandings for sea turtles in New York State, representing more than 50% of our animals stranding at one period of time. I would say after that would be vessel interactions, and entanglement would be the next. But of course, a lot of these are linked to human influence, and we're causing a lot of issues of why these animals are stranding locally. So just briefly, for our sea turtle rehab, these animals are brought to our facility and they receive a full admit physical. And just to go back one step, any sea turtle on the beach we're going to pick up. There's no leave it on the beach and let it be monitored. So we know when a sea turtle's on the beach that there's something going on with it, and so we're able to bring it back to our facility and perform that admit physical, get blood, weight. We collect level A measurements to look at morphometrics, and we record any external injuries. We're also able to do x-rays to look for any ingestions of hooks or anything that else could be a foreign object internally. Mostly these guys are with us for 6 to 9 months, which is a long time to be at rehab with us, where our seals are only with us for 6 to 8 weeks, and that feels like forever. So the difference with these guys is that they're much slower healers and have to be, in our care for a long time. There's also that component that it's the water temperature, right? So many of these animals are stranding during the winter months and therefore can't be released within 2 weeks because our temperatures are not ideal for them. So we're able to work with our partners within the network, and so we're part of a greater stranding network from Virginia to Maine is the Greater Atlantic, but there also are agencies just like us in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and we're able to work with them to coordinate southern releases for turtles that are ready, where we want to avoid secondary issues with them. And so these turtles get to fly privately through a company called Turtles Fly 2, where people with their own planes get to fly these turtles. We don't get to go, just the turtles in their banana boxes down south, where they meet a team just like us that bring them directly to the ocean and they get released. And so it's a great partnership that we have with them to be able to coordinate that. But most of our turtles are released about 80% locally, just because it takes that 6 to 9 months to be ready to be released, and therefore our water temps are ready for them. So when they are ready to be released, we've put a lot of effort into these animals and a lot of time and resources, and so we want to be able to mark them so that if they are resighted, we know who they are. And we're part of a bigger database that all the turtles in the US go into the same database. So if they are resighted, you can pretty much look them up if they have any external tags to them. So we use 2 primary types of tags. We use flipper tags, which are these little metal tags that go on the hind flippers. And each tag has a different number on them. And the reason why we do 2 is if one falls out, we still have the second one. The problem with these tags is that we're not able to use them on turtles that are under 30 centimeters, standard curve length, so that's the length of their carapace. We can only give it to the turtles that are larger than that. And most of our turtles that we bring in are under 30. They haven't developed a tag that actually fits those little flippers and won't cause any issues as they grow. So we mainly use these pit tags, which are like microchips that go into their front flipper, and I have it highlighted here. It goes right into that shoulder muscle. And it's a very small little chip that goes underneath the skin that when you scan it with a pit reader, you can actually get the number that goes with that turtle. And so most of our turtles have that. The problem with pit tags is that a lot of agencies don't have the pit tag scanner. Only rehabs really utilize them. And nesting ecologists don't have them out in the field. They're just looking for those flipper tags. So there's a chance that we're really missing this kind of resight on these turtles. So another type of external tag that we can use are these telemetry devices. There's acoustic tags, and then there's also these satellite tags that can provide movement behavior. And the reason why we can't use these on everybody is because they cost a lot of money, starting at $2,000 all the way up to $10,000 plus. So of course we can't put it on 50 turtles a year at this little not-for-profit, but we can select some handful of turtles to put them on. And the data from those tags really support the rehabilitation efforts that we've put in by providing insight that this animal got a second chance and was able to go back into the wild and exhibit normal behavior. So that leads me to the actual project that I'm here to talk about. So we had 2 objectives here. The first one was to monitor the post-release movement patterns of 3 species of sea turtle. So that's your loggerhead, green, and Kemp's ridley. We did not satellite tag any leatherbacks that were rehabbed at NYMRC and then released locally back in New York. And the second was to examine just utilization of sea turtles in New York waters. There are papers out there from 1992 and 2002 that state that turtles are here, but there's really no understanding of where they're using locally. So starting in 2019 till last summer, we released 31 satellite tags on 13 loggerheads, 10 Kemps, and 9 greens. And mostly these animals were juvenile and subadults. So our juveniles are those dinner plate size animals. Our subadults are mainly loggerheads, and they're a little bit larger, maybe 30 to 50 pounds. And we did tag one adult female loggerhead, which I'll tell you her story later on. We used a mix of spot and splash wildlife computers tags. And so the spot tags are actually designed for these really small turtles. We have to ensure that they have a less than 5% drag rate when we do attach the tag. And so those little spot tags actually are now missing the depth sensor that the splash tags have. So though we're putting them on a lot of juveniles, we're not getting as much data as if we could on the larger tags. All the tags that I deployed were anti-foul, just like the bottom of your boat, to ensure that we had no growth on these tags. They do spend a lot of time underwater, and so things are gonna grow pretty quickly on them. And then to attach them to the shell, I used a mix of fiberglass and epoxy. And it really just sticks to the top of the carapace. And if you're not familiar with the turtle shell, on that carapace, that top shell, there are these individual scutes. And as they grow, unlike a snake that sheds their skin, turtles shed their scutes. And so as they grow older, the shell grows with them, and those scute plates kind of fall off. And so over time, you can see in the bottom photo here, the epoxy and the fiberglass will just pop off as they grow. And so it stays on as long as they're not growing too fast. Once I attached it, all animals were released within 24 hours, but most of them were released immediately after the attachment. And we released everybody at Tiana Beach and Hampton Bays for consistency for the project. So just looking quickly at what that 31 tags looks like. So if you look at the top, you can kind of see blurred Long Island here. And so releasing at Tiana Beach, we see that these animals are moving, right? They're coming out of this area. And so we had an average duration of 216 days. And so Wildlife Computer states that anything over 30 days is successful. So we had a pretty high success rate in our average duration. This ranged from 28 days, and I will admit 28 days, the only tag I didn't anti-foul. So that shows you that it's really important to do that to your tags. And the longest duration is 657 days, which is still live now from 2 years ago, and shows no indication that it's going to stop unless it's slowly falling off. When we break down by species, we see for green sea turtles, we had 114 days average duration. Kemp's ridley, 187 days. And then, of course, our subadult loggerheads, 297. That's probably based on just their growth rate, and they're not growing as fast as those little guys. And also, they don't like to hide under rocks like our small greens that are probably knocking my tags off pretty quickly. We still have 4 tags live from a mix of the 2023 and 2022 release season. And all these maps are live on our website if you want to look at them in more detail. When we broke down movement patterns, we saw 3 movement patterns here. So the first one up here, this is our release site. We call this a southern coastal movement pattern. So these animals are leaving Long Island and following the coastline all the way down to Florida, North Carolina, Georgia. And this was seen by all 3 species. So it didn't seem that it was just the smaller guys. The loggerheads also participated in this movement, with almost 50% of our animals doing this southern coastal. And we saw this behavior from July all the way to November, indicating that, you know, this is probably the preferred choice of movement pattern out of the area. Then the secondary, we have what we call direct offshore. So these animals go offshore and then do these nice fun loop-de-loops, and then coastal and then offshore. So we assume that they're picking up with the Gulf Stream here to find warmer water. And these were less percentages, 19 and 13%. We saw this behavior in October to December, with 4 of these animals actually traveling into the Sound. And so I have to look into it more, but I do think that once they get into the Sound, it might be a little bit harder to navigate out, which would cause them to try to find warmer water as soon as they get out of the Sound, which would indicate why we're seeing these kind of later movements offshore in October and December. And then we had 7 tags that stopped signaling within New York waters, and we don't know where they went after that. So looking at New York specifically, we had an average of these turtles staying in our waters 75 days post-release. And we normally release between June and September. And so clearly those that were released later in the season didn't stay as long, but they did choose to stay here pretty much the rest of the summer. we had less than 10% restranded, and so what that means is these animals had stranded the previous year, and then after release we did see them again. So we had one confirmed dead on beach, that's that DOB, where it was a green sea turtle that was hit by a vessel. We have the proof that the tag was working perfectly and then stopped, and then the body was recovered about 2 weeks after the interaction, and the tag was no longer on the animal. And then we had 2 live restrands, so a Kemp's ridley and a loggerhead that stranded the next cold sun season. And these animals were found because of their satellite tags. We were able to figure out what beach they were at, and one of them survived the warming process and was able to be re-released again. But I chose to put him in Delaware and not New York the second time around. We had 4 tags that stopped signaling within New York waters with a range of 34 to 117 days. Which included a green, loggerhead, and 2 Kemp's ridleys. And overall, we saw a really large range between temperature of when these animals were moving out. So from 23.3 degrees Celsius all the way down to 9.4. And most of our loggerheads are the ones that clearly can handle the lower temperatures, leaving waters a little bit later in the season. But I do want to point out that almost 80% of our turtles didn't leave until October through December, meaning that they probably are staying here much longer than the summer months and really leading into the fall, which could be that kind of long season that we're seeing here with much warmer water going into the fall months, causing them to stay here longer, which also could be why we're seeing more cold sun sea turtles strand in the winters, because they're clearly not getting the cues to leave any sooner. So just showing you some of that New York data. As you can see, the star represents our release site at Tiana Beach. I've highlighted all the bays and the sound of where these turtles are utilizing. And each color is one turtle, so you can see this red guy really had a fun tour of Long Island. But you know, they are utilizing a lot of the bays, smaller water sources. They're going into the Long Island Sound. And so why this is important to me is because, one, there's clearly something that's keeping them around, that they want to stay here, hopefully some foraging sites that we're able to identify for these really important species here. But also, a lot of these areas have shared resources with us, and so we're really interested in that human interaction component and that overlap between humans and these charismatic species that we're probably leading to more increase in vessel interactions. And so data like this can hopefully help us find mitigation strategies to decrease these potential vessel interactions and shared water sources. And so all our turtles, all 31 turtles are represented on this because they mostly did stay here post-release. Oh, so we know they're here, and this is clearly a lot of great spatial data for us, but we want to know what they're doing. And so that leads me to our next phase of this project. And so this is in collaboration with Dr. Joe Warren's lab at Stony Brook. And so we implemented these customized animal tracking devices, which are these camera tags with both depth and audio sensors on them, that were able to kind of see that point of view of the turtle and what they're doing here and what they're seeing in local waters. So what's great about this project is that we have our sample size in-house, and so we were able to really modify our attachment protocols, which involve just suction cups on these animals, and be able to figure out placement so that we have that great point of view of the turtle and be able to see, you know, how we wanted, you know, ideally what we wanted to see from the turtle. And of course we want to capture their head and their front flippers and make sure that we have a great attachment, because these tags cost $10,000, and I think Joe would kill us if we lost any of them. And so in addition to just looking at placement, we were also able to identify turtles in-house that would be great candidates for having these tags on them, and be able to release them. So last summer we actually did 2 deployments. We did a summer and a fall deployment, one with a green sea turtle, juvenile green sea turtle, and the other one with a Kemp's ridley. So I'm going to show you some of those videos here. Double click. So this is our green sea turtle, and it'll make sense in a second. So clearly this green sea turtle found food immediately. Again, we released oceanside, And I believe that this was within 30 minutes of being released, the animal was already finding food. And to me, this is so important because rehabs get a lot of flack for, changing the behavior of these animals, but clearly this animal was with us for 9 months and found food right away. And so it really supports, this second chance for this animal. If you know anything about green sea turtles, they just love to eat, so it's not surprising that it found food immediately, but it's still really important data for us. The second video is from our Kemp's ridley, same juvenile Kemp's ridley. These were both cold sun sea turtles that had stranded, that we were able to put the cameras on. So this is a cool video because we were able to capture this interspecies dynamic. We believe that this is a winter skate that it's following. To me, I think it's following. And Kemp's ridleys really are benthic. They like dead fish, crabs, maybe some vegetation. So I'm not sure if he just wanted to have a little swim with his skate buddy or there's something else going on, but you see that he followed it until he came up to take a nice breath. So we've also able to capture some sharks, dusky sharks, and I think we had some dogfish as well. The clarity is clearly very different than our in-house tanks, but we're still getting some pretty good data. And so the plan for this summer is it's really based on what we have in-house. And this year we had an influx of loggerheads, so we're actually going to be doing a lot of loggerhead deployments this summer, hopefully, and be able to share that with you guys in the future. So I thought for the end of the talk here, we could talk about some positive case studies here. I want to start off with, we have this thing at our work where we name these animals after a theme every year. It's the demise of our team. We fight about it all year of what we're going to be the naming theme. Probably some of the team will tell you it's the best part of the job. And so you'll see some fun names up here. This year with Beastie Boy, we were naming them after rock and roll musicians. Our vet, Dr. Rob Pashoda, who volunteers all his time to us, is a huge alternative 90s fan, and so he got to name this turtle. But this was Beastie Boy, which is actually a hybrid sea turtle. It's a Kemp's ridley and loggerhead mix. Had a great loggerhead heart-shaped shell, but a Kemp's ridley face, and we were all confused in the field when we saw it. Nobody could identify the species. And so this animal stranded cold stunned, but also had evidence of fishery interaction, and it had a baited line coming out of the gape of its mouth, and it actually had swallowed the prong of the hook of the line, but had the weights pulling behind its mouth. And so it actually had ripped pretty much a big tear through the side of its mouth that was really infected. And so if you look in this x-ray here, you can see the hook right here in the middle. It was a 3-prong hook, but one of the prongs broke internally. And so this was during COVID that Dr. Rob did a 7-hour surgery on this animal where he was able to pull out the esophagus, make a single cut, and find this hook and remove it. And these turtles are amazing because after surgery, within 45 minutes of being back and out of anesthesia, the animal was already eating. So it was a great success on Dr. Rob's part. And so, of course, a lot of our satellite tags go on the biggest resource cases, these big surgical cases. And so we were able to put a track on that guy, and he lasted over 200 days. Then we have cavatappi, pasta. So cavatappi was also a cold sun sea turtle, but she had evidence of fisheries and vessel interaction. So if you look at this bottom photo, we got this. We thought this was a dead turtle. But for cold suns, you treat all turtles as alive. They can have a heartbeat of 1 beat per minute. They can have no responses, and they look like this on the beach, and people just walk right by them. So she's stranded at Hither Hills at 5:30 p.m., and so we sent the team out to go pick her up, and we had to trek her 1.5 miles on a sheet because she was so large to get her back to our rehab. But she had monofilament all wrapped around her front right flipper going down into the bone. She had 3 vessel strikes across her carapace and also evidence of that blunt force crushing her carapace. And we thought originally we were going to have to amputate that front flipper, but she continued to use it, and it healed really nicely. And I think her saving grace was that she had this crazy epibiota load on her shell, and some of the muscles that were on her shell kind of pulled together the vessel strike, and she had slipper snails inside her body cavity as well. So it was definitely an interesting case. And so we put a tag on her, of course, and she tracked for over a year. She's also a model. She's on the Wildlife Computer's sign. So she's a beautiful turtle. Of course, I can't not talk about Queen. So Queen is the only adult female that we've ever tagged, and she's the largest turtle that I've ever rehabbed. And in the record, she's the largest turtle to strand from Virginia to Maine. So she was over 300 pounds. She stranded due to that debilitated loggerhead or turtle syndrome. And she was actually stranding twice. Lifeguards pushed her in at Ho-Hum Beach, and then she stranded a second time, and you can see that her skin is all black. That's because she was completely buoyant and floating at the surface. And so we had to bring her back. She was bigger than our facility could handle, and she's actually the reason why we were able to flip our cetacean tank into a large loggerhead holding tank. And so we were able to keep her outside. She involved daily antibiotic injections that it caused us to go into the water and track her down and give her these injections. But she only stayed 4 months with us, and we put a tag on her, and you can see that she had one of the longest travels, and I thought that she was going to go to this nesting beach in Cape Verde, but she turned around right before that. And I do think that she was a sexually mature female. She had no tags on her, so it would have been really great to capture where she was going, but unfortunately the tag fell off before we knew. The last case I want to tell you about is Miss Petunia. So we were doing botanical themes, I think. And so Petunia was a green sea turtle that also was a cold stun that we put a sat tag on. And one day at work, we got a DM from one of our volunteers telling us that he thinks he saw Petunia on social media. And so we got this post from this captain who said, "Don't worry, he found this sea turtle with the satellite tag and he put it back in the water." We never got a call. And so when I look at our tracking data, Petunia was found right between the two bridges, right in the city here, and we were able to talk to the captain and talk about what we do, and he sent us all these photos, and it was great. But we call it an accidental capture. That was only a couple months after her release. But thankfully, she was able to navigate completely out of that area, which is pretty far into the Sound, and go completely offshore, and we tracked her for over 200 days. So in closing, clearly more data is needed to fully understand the foraging ecology of these sea turtles in New York. Our plan is to increase our sample size with more turtles, equipping them with both satellite and these CATS tags going into the summer and the next couple years, of course. We're going to do a further analysis of both temperature and diving behavior to kind of incorporate into this bigger data set. And then all this together will hopefully paint this great picture of New York sea turtles and understanding their population here. So I want to thank everybody that helped us with this project, and I'll take any questions.
All right, questions?
Nobody wants to talk. Oh.
It's really exciting to see these tags and what you're getting. We try to use them on sharks. We don't get anywhere near as long track as that. But I wanted to ask you about acoustic tags. So, I know, have you tried those? And I know there's a lot of difficulty trying to get them to stay and stick on a turtle's carapace. So I'm just curious why you can keep the tag on, a satellite tag on for so long, but there's so much trouble getting those acoustic tags to stay on turtles.
Yeah, I think so the attachment that I use for our satellite tags is, I think the benefit is that mix of the fiberglass, the putty, and the epoxy. I know a lot of sea turtle biologists use just straight epoxy, and I think the fiberglass really holds it to the shell a little bit longer. For acoustic tags, we can do different methods of drilling and zip tying it to the side, or using also similar cement or epoxy. Groups in New England Aquarium are actually doing internal acoustic tags on sea turtles. And so recently Fish and Wildlife has put a little bit more kind of limits on what we can do with these turtles in rehab, which is very different than wild capture. And so we're hopeful to use acoustic tags in the future. I think it'll be a great actual addition because you can get much longer data sets from them. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think it's in the down the future for us.
And so you haven't put any acoustic tags on any of these animals yet?
Yeah, historically we have done them, just a handful, less than I think 8 at Riverhead, but we haven't used them in a long time just because of the advancements of the telemetry devices.
Thank you.
I was wondering, based on what I saw, they're not like salmon. They don't have to go back to where they were born?
So the turtles that we're dealing with are juveniles. They're 2 to 3 years old, maybe up to 10. They don't return to their nesting beach if they're female until they're 20 to 25 years old. So that's the only time that they would go back to their original nesting grounds. Males don't go back to their nesting grounds. They stay in the ocean unless they strand.
I was wondering about, it looks as though both with these turtles and I had this question with the box turtles as well. If the shell is broken, and the sort of gets pinned back together, it will refuse itself. It will grow.
Yeah, so their carapace, with the right medicine, we use manuka honey to stimulate that growth because it's the same thing that your nails are made out of, that keratin. So manuka honey actually stimulates that growth, and it will come together. Some groups use like kind of braces or anything to pull it together. But within 9 months, we usually can see them heal. If it goes into the internal organs, then unfortunately, the animal doesn't have much of a chance to survive. And leatherbacks really don't do well with vessel interactions at all because they lack that really hard shell that the species that I talked about tonight have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.